Hello, and welcome to the Art of Teaching the Whole Child in a Pandemic, Cultivating Trauma-Sensitive Practices for Resilience. This is Module 1, Finding Strength in Habit, and this is the second video, and I'm excited to share with you. So, as a reminder, we are here in COVID experiencing increased levels of unpredictability and disconnection, which is leading to increased levels of anxiety, depression, and burnout among ourselves and our students, as well as decreased levels of focus, engagement, and wellness. And so in order to respond to that situation, we want to build more predictability and more connection with a number of strategies and routines for doing so. But these are built upon the foundations of staff wellness and self-care, which involves putting our masks on first so that we can then help our students, and noticing and cultivating our own habits, which involves tiny steps forward so we can find those moments of connection and predictability. So we're not revolutionizing the way we're doing things, but looking for more moments to apply these evidence-based strategies. And so you might be asking, why are we still focusing on self-care? Why are we still focusing on habits? And the key here, of course, is modeling wellness, being able to stabilize ourselves. So our students need to see that we can continue to be stabilizing ourselves with these tools, modeling the wellness that we want for them, because we can't pour from an empty cup. We know our students need us now more than ever. And so that involves taking care of ourselves and practicing self-reflection. And so a lot of the ways that we notice today, this will be the bridge today of moving from taking care of ourselves and into helping our students. And so self-reflection is going to be a huge part of how we navigate that. And so I'm excited to share this video with you. Our module objectives for this first one is to understand the ingredients of habits, to notice the ingredients of self-care habits and stressors, and to cultivate more habitual self-care routines. So you're going to need about 20 minutes, some clear headspace, and a printed or digital journal, which looks a little bit like this, so that you can do steps 4 through 6, which really focus and zone in on noticing those stressors so that we can cultivate more self-care routines. So nice job for already completing the first 3 steps. And now you're on to step 4. And after completing those first 3 steps, you should have a cue, routine, and reward recipe for your existing self-care habits. And so I hope that was a helpful activity to help you see how our existing habits operate within that recipe. And that can be a guiding way of work for the rest of the module series. And so cue, routine, and reward will be a core part of the way we think about our strategies and going forward. So I encourage you to, as we move through this video, to take notes on our guided notes section. So the first and key step here that we're going to talk about, this is the core ingredient to this module, is noticing our personal pit and peak. So every day we're going to have pits, whether it's out of our own frustration, students' disengagement, maybe the stress level that an activity involves, and we're going to have peaks. The success moments where we do find success, the students are engaged, or there was a positive experience in some way. And so not every day is going to have the pit of the year or the peak of the year, but every day has its own pit and its own peak. And it's important for us to notice those because that will be the key step for moving forward in cultivating resilience. Because at the end of the day, these will happen involuntarily. We don't have control over the peaks and pits a whole lot, other than the fact that we'll have them, and they're going to have beginning, middle, and end. So we need tools to help us navigate those pits, to dig us out of those pits, to notice when we're at the peaks, and to celebrate those. And I would be remiss to not mention the fact that right now you're more than a teacher. Many of us are parenting from home, teaching from home, juggling all kinds of other things that we weren't before COVID. And so because of this, your pits and peaks are going to have a unique situation this year, maybe different than they have been in the past. We're all learning new ways of navigating remote learning, hybrid learning. So because of all that, there's going to be a new ways that we're experiencing these. And at the end of the day, I want to highlight that you're more than a teacher. And that's part of the reason why we want to focus on self-care, is because of we acknowledge that this is going to be a very difficult year. So it's really important to invest in ourselves. And so the first step that we're going to do to be able to notice that is to be able to journal it. So your journal for this week looks a little bit like this and involves journaling for a few days what your peaks and pits are. So maybe if you're watching this at the end of the day today, go ahead and journal your peak and pit from today. If you've already, just think about maybe yesterday, if you're working on this in the middle of the day, what was your peak and pit yesterday? And so it might be something like, for me as a psychologist, testing. Recently, the student was very engaged a few days ago, and they're engaged like 95% of the time. And I felt like 9 out of 10, like that was just in my groove. This is part of what I do on a regular basis. It hasn't changed a whole lot because of COVID. And so I felt pretty good. A pit has been bath time lately, just to highlight another connection to home life. I have a toddler, and that bath time can be difficult where you need constant redirections from the start. And this is right, not new to any of you. You've probably experienced certain activities or lessons where there's constant redirections required to get through it. And so the students are maybe engaged like half of the time, 50% of the time, and you feel not a 9 out of 10, you feel like a 4 out of 10 because of that. And so it's going to look different for every person. And so if you're an elementary school teacher, maybe your concerns are math centers, which are go pretty well. Or maybe your downside, the pit of the day was a science lesson where they just were not zoning in. It was hard, it was difficult material to get through, and so there was constant redirections needed. Or maybe in your middle or high school, you just have different periods that have different factors involved, where involving the levels of engagement that students have, the need for your support, etc. So we have these different stressors in the day, and different pits and peaks. And so it's okay for everyone to have different ones, but it's important that we take notice of that and journal it for a few days so that we can kind of notice those common themes about what is difficult. And the key reason I'm sure you're asking is, well, why are we doing this? What, like, is this just a act of self-care? It's actually an act of noticing where we can improve and take care of ourselves and our students, because this is where we can build new habits. And so seeing the pit as a cue in the cue routine reward cycle can empower us to navigate those. And so if you have these pits, we can plug in those pits tiny self-care habits like deep breathing, and some other ones that I'll share with you today. And so then the reward ultimately is that predictability and connection that we're looking for. And so we can bridge and build upon this. This is called habit stacking, which is building multiple habits on top of each other. So I do take the deep breath and then I use the strategy. And so this is a way that we can pivot from taking care of ourselves into using strategies that will help us dig out of that pit for both ourselves and our students. So some examples that you can find in your journal are thinking about pre-pits as cues. So maybe you feel there are certain times in the day where you feel a pit coming and you can anticipate it. So maybe it's a certain period or something like that, or a certain activity. Or maybe it's in the pit that you notice the negativity somehow. And so either of these can be your cue that you anticipate a pit coming, or you are experiencing it directly. And some then routines that we can use to put our masks on. And the next steps will be for moving forward into the modules involve the strategies that we'll use after putting our mask on. So the things that you might think about, feeling a pit coming could be anything. Just some examples in here, and you can come up with your own of starting to give feedback, seeing a student's bad look. Like we all know Joe, when he walks in and he looks that certain way, like I just know I feel a pit coming. Or maybe you are wrapping up a fun activity and you just know your little ones are going to have a hard time leaving that activity. There's a number of ways we kind of feel those pits coming in. And maybe it's in the middle of it that you're already there. There's nothing, like you didn't anticipate it coming. You see a student that is absent that you were kind of really hoping would show up to your video call. Or maybe you hear a disrespectful comment being made, or you get crickets on your Zoom call, or get crickets in terms of student submissions from a remote learning opportunity. Or you find yourself repeating yourself, or giving Joe that teacher look. We all have the teacher look, right? The stare of death that we hope will communicate psychically to the student what we mean. We mean business. And so some of these are ways that we notice in the moment that negativity. And so some ways that we can kind of take care of ourselves when we notice these pits coming or experiencing them are things, little small things. And so it's important to keep it tiny. So whether it's a gratitude statement, to just in general out loud, or to yourself, or giving a compliment to a student or a colleague, writing some to-dos, taking deep breaths. There's a lot of little things that we can do. The key here is a 2-minute rule, or a 30-second rule, or something like that that says, like, I can do this really quickly in the moment as this occurs. And so these are in your journal as some examples. So just when you write this out, what it looks like is kind of identifying one pre-pit cue and one pit as a cue. So I want everyone to have two habits created from this experience of noticing your pits and peaks. And so maybe it's after seeing Joe's mad look, giving Joe a compliment and asking how I can help. So, telling him I like his shirt and asking how I can help, and notice that I'm catching the good. Like even when Joe, I know, has a lot of difficult behaviors, I'm giving him some kind of compliment on his behavior, on showing up. I mean, that's a huge one right now for a lot of our students. And I'm sure that can relate to some of you that just showing up sometimes is huge. And that helps me notice and catch the good, which is good for him, for Joe, but also good for me as well. Maybe it's after you repeat a direction. I'm going to take a deep breath and attend to other students, to the students that are on task, for my own sake, to be able to notice that many more students are on task and I avoid that power struggle. If I've already repeated myself, maybe I need a break, a slight little break from the student who is off task, and to be able to notice the other students who are on task. Which is a great strategy for the students, but also good for us to take care of ourselves so that we're not getting into those power struggles and negotiations that can often happen in these situations. So it's important to design these two habits to kind of game plan for what can I do in anticipation of the pits and in response to the pits. So once you've done that, you have completed steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so I'm really proud of you for doing that. Take the time that you need this week to notice the pits and peaks that you have before you, the ones that are most common, most predictable, so that then you can design a habit that's going to be critical to navigating those pretty predictable peaks, those pretty predictable pits. Some next steps after this is keep in mind that resilient people strive for progress, not perfection. So you're not going to be perfect with this habit when you get it kicked off, but continue to notice the ways that you can use it and stick to it. So within about a week of watching this video, I'd encourage you to share your pit and peak of the week and your new plans to cope. Like, what are your new habit plans for coping with this? Because we can't pour from an empty cup, just as a reminder. We need to be able to take care of ourselves and cope with these pits. So upload your habit plan into our classroom to share that. And then step 7, which will be coming soon in a video, will be explaining how we keep a pulse on ourselves to track our progress and our using our habits that we've designed, and to share that with a colleague, because we are better together. So I encourage you to share with a colleague. There's step 7 in our journal that involves a few activities you can do to meet with a partner or a small team, to build connection with them, to bounce ideas off of each other about your self-care habits, so that you can be that partnership and they can help you with that, because we're always better together when we're trying these new things. And who knows, you might have some great habits to share with your colleagues and they might vice versa, if that time is protected, but that time has to be protected for you to do that, if you want to do that. So after this module, I hope you've been blessed by the opportunity to notice the ingredients of habits, to notice the ingredients of your stressors, and to cultivate more habitual routines. And just as a summary, we're going to have those pits, we're going to have peaks, but if we can notice the pits, respond to them with self-care habits, and that will then be a segue into the strategies that we're going to be talking about, so that we can build more predictability and connection with our students. So if you'd like help with designing those or have any questions about how to complete these activities, I would encourage you to email me at this email right here. And I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you so much.